What's up, beautiful people? It is your favorite light MB. Welcome to another episode of the Confidence Way podcast, where we are shining light on the darkness that is domestic violence and abuse. If you are just now tuning into the show, I need you to know this. We got three simple goals: educate, empower, and encourage. We are here to educate anyone who has never been in an abusive relationship, doesn't understand the complexities of an abusive relationship. You got questions and we got answers. Or perhaps you have been in an abusive relationship and you don't even know it. We are here to empower all of our survivors to stand up and share your story without shame, fear, guilt, or judgment. Listen, you are strong, you are powerful, and your voice deserves to be heard. And to anyone who is currently suffering in silence, baby, let me tell you, we are here to encourage you that you are not alone. You are not crazy. Abuse is not normal. Your feelings are valid. And despite how it may look and feel in this very moment, there's always a way out. But you got to be willing to be honest with your help, with yourself, and seek support. Now, we got to go ahead and hop up in this conversation because it's time to rise above these insecurities, release the burdens of shame and guilt, and revive our God-given power, purpose, and passion the confidence way. Because we about to light it up. Welcome again to the Confidence Way podcast. It is such an honor and a privilege to introduce our guest on the show today, Miss Sarah. Pew, 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 pew. Confetti, 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 confetti. How are you doing, girl?
Oh, fantastic today. Thank you for asking, Emily. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate this so much. As an opportunity just to answer some of your questions. Yeah.
So we're going to be here, and this is going to be a little bit of a different episode because normally we're talking about abusive relationships, and they're usually spousal relationships or partner relationships. But Miss Sarah has a totally different perspective and dynamic of what she's experienced, what she's been through, and she's going to shine some light on some things that perhaps maybe someone you know or even yourself have experienced and you hadn't even realized that it was abuse. So my first question, Sarah, for you is, since we have this going on and we're heading in this direction, what was abuse like for you and what kind of relationship did you have with it?
What was abuse like for me? It was long-standing for me. Given that it was a family member, it was my father and is my father. So I'm now 47, and I've been in this relationship for all of my life. And after going no contact for just under a year, I'm back in contact with my father. I use the terms perpetrator and father interchangeably, just depending on how I'm looking at things, I suppose. So my experience of abuse in the relationship has been long-standing. There's a lot of nuance to that. Maybe we'll get more into it. How I view it, it's been a massive roller coaster. I mean, that's an understatement. There are so many challenges that one has to go through in an abusive relationship. Let alone stating the obvious, psychological and emotional impact, as well as potentially physical impact and spiritual impact. So I sort of view it holistically, generally. And I think, just looking at it that way, I can tell you more as we go along. I think that's just sort of like a very general sort of answer.
Seems like a lot of people who have experience, including myself, it's not usually just abuse in one avenue or one lane. Like you mentioned, it's holistic. But I want to rewind something back because you said that you had went no contact with your father for just under a year. What brought you to that decision?
Well, I was physically exhausted. So my perpetrator, my father, was more emotionally abusive. So he wasn't so much physically abusive. Just in my situation. So I was physically exhausted by the time we moved interstate. Actually, we moved interstate about 18 months ago. I'm in Australia. We moved from Melbourne to northern New South Wales. And it all happened very quickly. But at that stage, I was just wrecked. I was wrecked physically. I was wrecked emotionally. I was extremely stressed with the predicament I was in. Um, yeah, and in order to move safely, I got an intervention order actually to move interstate safely.
From your
Yeah,
father.
from my father. He didn't believe me when I told him I got an intervention order because I tried to be open with him about the process a little bit because it was so stressful for me. I had to be, transparent with people that were around me at the time, helping me to realize what I needed to do at that stage. So, like I said to my father, look, you've got an injury. I can't deal with this anymore. We're leaving. We're moving interstate. He wasn't happy. Typical domestic or family violence situation. They don't like losing control, and his mood changed significantly when I told him we were moving interstate, and so at that time, I started to see the disorder more fully. So my father, he has the full narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. But he's actually, because I was training as a psychologist about 10 years ago, but that's another story. I'm not one. That's another story. But my father is actually on the psychopathy spectrum as well. So he's on the psychopathy spectrum with what I say is inherent narcissistic personality disorder. Often, if they are on the psychopathic spectrum, they do have NPD as well. So yeah, so it was the most stressful time. I've got a young child too who has special needs, and I'm a sole parent. So looking after my young son, who was I think he was about just nearly 4 at the time, was extremely challenging. Yeah, to say the least. Yeah.
For clarification purposes, were you and your child living with your father at the time, or were y'all just living in proximity to him and you needed to move farther away?
It's a good question. It's a question a lot of people ask. What I've since realised it is a very enmeshed relationship. So in psychology, they often use the term enmeshment in family relationships and family dynamics. So it's sort of because of the control nature of my father and his disorder. Although I was 46 at the time, it was too enmeshed. Enmeshed, 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 that's the word. And he also, did live in, we did see, like, we were spending a lot of time together, which families do. But because he does have the disorder, it was, I would classify it as a very enmeshed relationship, which I've since recently discovered that's what it was. Yeah.
When you say enmeshed, are you meaning that y'all didn't necessarily live together, but because maybe he was dependent on you for things, or made you feel like he was dependent on you for things, you are around him a lot and you had to separate from that?
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Absolutely. He's a covert vulnerable narcissist. So the vulnerability aspect is that, yeah, I guess actually it's a really good question you asked that at this time, because yeah, he was vulnerable. He was holding on for dear life, but we didn't live together, no. But we did spend a lot of time together, I mean, with my other siblings as well. I've got 2 brothers, and I'm not sure if that answered your question. Sorry. There's a lot of content to discuss around it, but yeah. Did I answer your question? His vulnerability, isn't it? Yeah, thank you for saying it that way. That's exactly right. It's really nice to be able to view it, from, in hindsight, having left and separated, we're in a different state now. Looking back in and seeing that he was vulnerable, yeah. He was holding on for dear life, but he's been doing that for such a long time. Yeah, but that's what it is. That's what it is. That is the vulnerability that often comes with narcissism. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
because you've had experience doing the research and learning things, and we're in a, I guess, a phase in the world right now where there are a lot of trigger words like narcissism, love bombing, gaslighting, all of these things, and people don't really know what that means. So, from your
Yeah.
experience and your perspective, and the information and research that you learned, how would you define narcissism, and specifically the type that your father has?
Well, it did take me some time to learn specifically what type of narcissism my father had. I had to do a lot of research to get to that stage, and I only discovered that about 2 or so years ago. And it took me a long time to get to that point. But I was watching a YouTube program by Dr. Ramani, which a lot of people have heard of. Dr. Ramani, she's a specialist of narcissism in the States. And she differentiated in this YouTube the different types of narcissism. You've got your overt, just very generally, it's, generally either overt narcissism or covert narcissism. And when she discussed covert narcissism, I just knew straight away it was an exact fit with my dad and his symptoms. So, yeah, my father's a covert narcissist. Yeah, very under the radar, very highly manipulative, extremely manipulative. Yeah, I think coverts are a lot harder to pick because they're not your flashy, overt, grandiose. They're both grandiose, but narcissists, yeah. You don't always know you're looking into a mirror. You don't know that, you might be talking to a covert narcissist and you really wouldn't know it. Yeah.
That manipulation is an amazing, I guess you can call it a war tactic, because it feels like when you're in a relationship and you experience any kind of abuse, psychological, mental, financial, emotional, physical, you really do feel like you're in a war zone because you're constantly having to try to hold on to your sanity and convince yourself that you're not crazy, you're not going insane, and then try to believe that while all the time the other person is doing and saying things that are trying to convince you of the opposite, until they show a side of you that you're like, wait, I know I saw what I just saw. And they go back and forth. Like it's just a cycle of things. Did you feel like you were in an abusive situation all the way since from being a young girl? Or did you kind of just gradually grow into seeing, hey, this relationship with my dad is not normal, and there's something off about the way he's treating me and my brothers?
I actually think I just grew into understanding what he was. I didn't really have any inkling at all when I was young. Um, yeah, it wasn't until sort of I became more self-aware of myself, and then started to, sort of look into the relationship over time and realized something wasn't quite right. And then just sort of worked it out from there. But it did take some time. But no, I didn't, have a bad childhood. I mean, I had some typical stresses, I suppose. My parents did divorce when I was in my early 20s, for example, which can be a very stressful time. But I didn't even find that too stressful, to be honest. So it's really, I'm enjoying answering these questions because I'm getting insight as we go along as well, because the divorce often does have a massive impact on a child, and it really didn't affect me as much as I thought it, you'd think it would. I guess my parents did, although they were very different individuals, they did sit down and very, amicably, and they said, look, and they explained it to us as kids, but uh, so I think that's a testimony to my mother's strength, actually, because I think, the more I go along, the more I think she did have a lot of insight into her former husband's disorder. Yeah, very strong woman, my mother. Yeah, I just really love your questions because, I'm getting, insight into my, yeah. Um, So yeah, no, I had a pretty good childhood, and I just in summary, and I just realised it as I went along what my father was. Yeah.
And then perhaps too, with you being in your 20s when they separated, you were more mature emotionally and mentally, and you still had the opportunity to grow up through your adolescence and your true learning years with both of your parents in the house. Have you ever had the opportunity to have a conversation with your mom about her experiences with being married to your dad?
Not as much as I would have liked. My mum passed in 2021. Um, I still feel very close to her now. We had a good relationship in general. We had fought, issues here and there, like most mother-daughter relationships, but generally we loved each other very, very much. And there were little hints that she gave along the way. My father, a common characteristic of narcissists is infidelity. And there was one issue of infidelity that my mum had to go through in their marriage. And she was pretty open about that and how much that hurt her. And how my father, wanted to come back into the relationship. She did go back once, and then they separated again, and then he asked her back and she declined the second time. So they ended up going their separate ways at that stage. Yeah, which must have been around when I was in my late teens, early 20s. So I've since spoken to other extended family members, actually. I spoke to an uncle not long ago, and he remembers my father from when my parents were young, when they started dating and all that, way back. And he refers to my father as like an infidel, which is the same kind of word, infidel. But I can't remember, there was a word before it, like something infidel. So I have extended family that, on some level were aware that, the dynamic between my parents, maybe wasn't right. So yeah, but my mum was pretty open about how much he hurt her. Yeah. Yeah, she acknowledged that. Yeah.
And the uncle that you spoke to, was that your paternal uncle or was what is your mom's side of the family?
Maternal, my mother's brother. She had 6 siblings. Yeah. So I spoke to him recently again, actually. They caught up with my father last week. So yeah, I guess I'm very blessed. I'm so blessed. I'm so feeling so blessed in my life at the moment, because when we moved into state, all these blessings started to happen, like we got a rental property up here after the floods here. There were some floods here a couple of years ago in New South Wales that just devastated the area, where there's still a lot of homelessness as a result and a lot of struggles. So we got a rental property. I got into a Master of Criminology, and I got a scholarship in that course as well. But I got the scholarship because I left a family violence situation. So it's the only time I've ever used my father as collateral, because obviously, and he wasn't happy about it. It took him weeks to come to, congratulate me and all that. But yeah, they have that opportunity here in Australia where you, if you have been in family violence, and I am a single parent and I live in a rural area, you can get scholarships, as I discovered. So I was just absolutely overwhelmed by that, because I have been diagnosed with complex, or post-traumatic stress disorder since coming up here. So yeah, but we're doing really well. And as I said, we've got so many blessings here, and we're very happy here now. So yeah.
Now, you said your dad was upset. Did you let him know that you got a scholarship and what the scholarship was for? Or was he just strictly upset at the fact that you're moving and you're starting to dive into a new career?
Well, really good question. I think the latter is becoming more obvious in recent time because I was triggered really severely just the last couple of weeks, actually, with my post-traumatic stress. So what happens with that is when you get triggered, when you have post-traumatic stress, you go into fight or flight. And you either, kind of fight or flee, you go into that fight or flight response. So the last couple of weeks have been horrendous. Uh, the reason being is, like, I started uni again this week. I finished the first semester last year and I'm doing the second semester now this year. And all I can say is the triggers, there is a link between narcissistic abuse and post-traumatic stress disorder, big time. And from what I know, they're only just starting to link other disorders like bipolar and ADHD with narcissistic abuse as well. So yeah, the triggers can be pretty frightening and pretty overwhelming. So I have had to draw on a lot of assistance from the community, mental health workers. They have a domestic violence hotline you can ring here, and the counsellors are amazing. You can speak to them if you get triggered or you need to speak to someone. I also have a psychologist now that I'm starting EMDR therapy with, which is trauma therapy. So we've just started that last week. So it's so important to reach out, if you do recognise that you have some trauma issues or post-traumatic stress. It is totally understandable that you would, most people, I think, there's a lot of lack of knowledge about narcissistic abuse and recovery out in the community. And I think, there needs to be more understanding of the impact of domestic and family violence, and specifically narcissistic abuse. I discovered last year that it was only in the 90s that the term psychopathy, which is related to narcissism, was introduced to criminology, only in the 90s. So there's a lot that needs to happen on a societal level to get this information out there. A lot of doctors aren't aware of the impact of narcissistic abuse. So if you go to a doctor and ask for assistance and ask for help, it can often be very frustrating because they don't understand, they haven't had first-hand experience of what it's like to be the recipient of narcissistic abuse. So it's a very challenging thing to navigate, but it is very possible to heal it if you get the right help. Yeah.
I agree with that. Anybody who's experiencing any type of abuse, the best thing to do, one of the best things, is what Sarah mentioned earlier, is just if you're able to go no contact, because abuse is usually wrapped up, regardless of what kind it is, in some type of mental control. And you don't understand why you stay. People don't understand why people stay, but it's something in there that has you bonded to that person, some kind of trauma bond, something that's going on mentally that makes you stay put. And if you can't, the one of the best ways to break free of that really is just to stop allowing them to play the mind game with you. Stop allowing them to play the victim with you. Stop allowing them to tap onto your empathetic system of wanting to care and wanting to love, because you do love somebody and you do want the best for them. And sometimes you feel like you have to save them, but you can't save people. They have to want to change for themselves. Now,
Absolutely.
in Sarah's case, though, it's hard because this is a parent, someone who's raised you. What you mentioned, that you were just physically exhausted, not because you were experiencing any kind of physical abuse, but your body was responding to the stressors that you constantly had to endure, I imagine, day in and day out. Can you paint a picture for us to let us know, like, what did it look like from a father-daughter dynamic of his narcissistic abuse and how it was impacting, affecting you?
Well, at the time, just prior to leaving, I did speak to a counsellor who mentioned that when we did move interstate, I'll probably have what they call adrenal fatigue or adrenaline fatigue. Since moving, I've realised I do have I'm still recovering from adrenal fatigue. So that's adrenaline fatigue. So that's like your whole body and mind are stressed in this relationship to extremes, and particularly over time. I think, if you're in this kind of relationship over a long period of time, it has a massive impact on the body and your stress and also your mental health. Absolutely. And I would encourage people to definitely go no contact. I absolutely had to go no contact for the first 11 months. And I probably should have gone no contact for much longer than that. But each perpetrator is different, I guess. In my case, for example, my father doesn't substance abuse. That's a huge factor. If the perpetrator is using drugs or alcohol, I think, yes, definitely you would have to go absolutely no contact for your own sanity. In my case, I think most people I've spoken to, they do say that going no contact is the ultimate resolution in the long term. And I think generally that is true. I'm taking a bit of a gamble going back into this relationship because it does take 7 attempts to leave family or domestic violence, and it does tend to get worse if you go back. So that has been my experience. Where it did get worse when I went back after the 11 months, and it's gotten worse since. But I'm trying to manage it.
How has it gotten worse once you left and then you went back?
My father can be quite verbally aggressive. So I am in contact currently, but not personally, not via the personal mobile, but via iMessage and email. And I guess he knows how to push my buttons. He knows how to push my buttons. It's the language he uses. They're doing some studies at the moment on the language of narcissists and how they use language to manipulate, how they use language to triangulate. And I think triangulation is a really insidious tactic that they use. And they use it all the time. So it's very related. It's related to the term gaslighting, where they try to, challenge your reality. And they also try to challenge other people's interpretation of reality. And that's triangulation in a very basic way. I'm not an expert on this. But I think, it comes out in their language, and that can be a trigger. And you think, well, God. And you do see things here and there about interactions, people talking about their interactions with narcissists and perpetrators, and how they sort of they don't acknowledge how you're feeling, and they'll just sort of make a comment that really undermines you and makes you feel just horrible. And they do have, I have read recently that there was a study done. This guy did a study on the brains of narcissists, psychopaths, but generally psychopaths, will meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. And they did these MRI scans, and they actually found that the parts of the brain that are responsible for emotional processing are abnormal in psychopaths or often narcissists, I would surmise, based on that. So they actually have, brain damage. They're not neurotypical, they're neuroatypical, their brains are different, they're wired differently. And those who wire together fire together, that saying? If you gel with someone, or your brain, if you wire, people who get along and they sort of connect. Their brains wire together. Narcissists and psychopaths, their brains are wired differently. So it can be really, really frustrating trying to communicate with a narcissist or a psychopath. Their brains are literally different. Yeah, their brains are not normal. So hopefully that answers your question. Sorry. The language. So you're asking how they trigger, how they use language. I guess. Like I said, it can be very frustrating trying to communicate and have a relationship with a narcissist. They're just in a different space. And I think, what I've realized, been thinking recently in regards to that research is, well, if those parts of the brain that are involved in emotional processing don't work properly, what explains their behavior? Is there a maliciousness there? Is there a maliciousness there because they lack the brain that's capable of emotional processing? Does that, because those parts of the brain are not working properly and are kind of shut down, does that resolve in them not being able to make conscious ethical decisions, and therefore they make the wrong decisions? Or is there more intent there? Are they really purposefully trying to be malicious, and are they jealous? Are they envious? I think that there is a bit of that in there. But I think that, to try and navigate these relationships, and you always have to make the perpetrator accountable. That the perpetrator always has to be accountable for their actions. So it's a real fine line of trying to balance all these factors. And if you do choose to stay in there, and there's absolutely should be no blame whatsoever. I mean, I haven't left yet. I may leave. I'm still trying to understand the real core of this disorder. What psychopathy actually is. And my father did say to me once, not that long ago, that we were talking about psychopathy, because I wrote about psychopathy in my first semester last year in my master's, and I sent him the essay. And my father came back and said, because my father admitted he was a psychopath to me a couple of years ago, which is just crazy. I mean, they do know what they're doing. I think generally they do.
Absolutely know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They absolutely know.
I think so. I'm starting to really see that now. I'm starting to really realise that core, they know what. Yeah, they can see what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and it's like, how do you make them accountable for their behaviour? It's really, really challenging, because they have an injury, like they call it an injury, but and they're always playing the victim and all that. It's like, it's extremely challenging. So there should be no blame. I mean, I tried to take responsibility for my father for a very long time, and I still take responsibility for him. I can't let go, even though I've had so many people tell me he's not my responsibility. I can't save him. It's so difficult to let go.
I mean, he's your father after all, and it's easier to say that with someone who isn't your parent, And I believe that even in other situations, like where kids are seeing their parents who are drug addicts and all of these things, and they keep trying to save them, and you can't save them, they have to really be willing to make that step on their own. But because they're your parent, and because you love them so much, you want to see the end of their life, or the end of your life, knowing that you did your very best and that you didn't give up on them. And you don't want to hold the responsibility that if something were to happen to them, now I'm going to carry that burden because I didn't give it my all. So it's completely understandable for you to be in that situation where you're fighting and battling the line of, do I put me and my son's health, mental, and everything above and just let my dad be what's going to be? Or do I try to find a way to balance our health and still be there for him? Because after all, he is my dad. Like, that's a tough situation to be in for sure. And I had
Yeah.
no idea about the research of the difference or the underdevelopment or the distortion of the brain. That's interesting. I would love to see some more information on that. You mentioned a minute ago about your dad's his type of abuse was really verbally, he's manipulative and he's verbally aggressive. What did that look like in your specific experience? What does the verbal abuse look like? What is the him playing the vulnerable victim thing look like what was that dynamic for you that caused you to be so exhausted and experience adrenaline fatigue and all of these other things that impacted you physically simply from his words and his actions?
It's a good question. I think the best way to view it, the way that I'm viewing it currently, is it's to do with the way their brains work. They do have a very, very stunted ability to empathize and relate to people. So these narcissists. So I'm sort of looking at it as a dysfunction on their part, and but what I think is that is enough to cause post-traumatic stress. Just the mere fact that it's not a normal interaction, it's not a normal communication, it's not a normal relationship, just merely because of that, because they can't process emotion. They're not going to give you what you need, in a relationship, whether it's a parent or a partner. They can't give you what you need, and I think that is enough to cause things like post-traumatic stress disorder. That is enough to cause things like bipolar disorder. That is enough to cause, ADHD, because it's not normal. It's not normal for humans to interact that way. It's natural for humans to have empathy with each other and, connect with each other. And with a narcissist, they're just incapable of it. So, yeah, it's potentially a very dangerous and damaging relationship just in that regard. Yeah, I really do believe that. I just really think it's just that human element that itself that causes that's lacking, that causes a lot of damage.
Now, in your case, because you have a 4-year-old or a 4-year-old son, did you ever notice that any of your dad's narcissism was directed towards him, or was it always like, were you able to do a good job of keeping your son at bay from it, and it was always directed towards you?
My father definitely used my son as a scapegoat. It was horrible. It was a horrible period in our lives before we left. It went on for months. My father was targeting my son as a scapegoat. My son has special needs. He has Down syndrome. He's vulnerable. Yeah, I had a breakdown actually when he was born, because I was so scared that what happened to me was going to happen to my son. And my father completely used him to keep me in there. He used my son to control me. And it's just, they know that children are the thing that pull on your heartstrings. They can use children to get to you, and they can use children to abuse you. So yeah, it's really insidious when kids become involved, and that's the main reason why we ended up getting out of there eventually. Yeah.
How would, like in your case, how would you like show us or tell us in your words so that we can see how your dad would use your son in the situation to make things worse for you?
There's one very clear incident where my son was about 18 months old, and he was just sitting at that stage because he has a developmental delay. And my father, with his no empathy and all, was throwing a ball at his head. And my father, he's quite well educated, my father, he's, middle class and all that. And I was just like, it's like he didn't know how to relate to my son at all. He's like, in my experience, narcissists aren't very, they're not that great with children. Um, but
Girl,
that's just from my experience.
it's not just your experience. It's almost like they speaking from my experience, it's almost like they want the child, they want to have access to the child, but they don't want the responsibility that comes with raising or keeping a child.
And also they don't have the skill, like they don't have this sort of social skill to be able to relate either. Yeah, that's exactly right. So it can be multifaceted, but they essentially they want to keep the source in there, which is you. So they will try and use the kids to keep you in there. And I did have a go at my father for that, because I said, just I had to leave my son once in his care, and I was scared of leaving him alone with him, because I just said to my father, look, nothing around the head area. No, you can't do that to a child. It's not socially, it's not appropriate. So I had to explain that to him, which is something I know I shouldn't have had to explain in the first place. Another perspective also is that, narcissists tend to be very morbid about life, and, in general, they tend to view life as, pretty shitty and, pretty dark and awful. And, uh, another perspective on that throwing the ball at the head scenario was, I think he was trying to toughen my son up. It's like, there's other ways of, there's other ways of, instilling resilience in a child.
It's
Yeah.
interesting to hear this from someone else. Because I can really, I haven't had a conversation thus far with anyone else who's maybe one or two who's really like just touched on that. And I don't know, like my son's dad was the same. Like at 2 years old, he's trying to get him to do squats and push-ups and like, did you do your push-ups today? You're the man. And I'm like, he's literally a baby. I don't understand. And it's what you
Mm.
said, like they have this disconnect, or they don't, like they're trying to toughen up a baby. And he even was doing that with his older son, who was at the time like 5 or 6, just trying to almost like rip them away from the opportunity of being a child and making children mistakes and having silly children moments, to force them into this space of, you're going to be a man, so you're going to start training like one now. Or I don't know, you can't get in their brains
Yeah.
really, unless you're a professional. But it was interesting that you said that, and that's why I was making the facial expressions, because I was like, oh my gosh, somebody else gets it.
Yeah, I can tell you, it's I know you've obviously witnessed that as well. And um I don't know, I mean, I'm still learning as I go as well. But I was going to say, I think that there is another way of looking at it is, there's a difference in the parenting style. Like the parenting style for me just didn't work with me. My father's parenting style, you could look at it that way, but obviously it's clear narcissism. I mean that is narcissism, that sort of behavior. But like you could also view it as like, is there a dissonance, or, between the child's temperament and the father's or the mother's parenting style. And sometimes if the parenting style isn't right, it causes more, damage. But I don't know, it's just another way of looking at it is, you know, authoritarian and that's an authoritarian parenting style, not what they call an authoritative parenting style. Authoritarians using a lot of harsh discipline, a lot of, control, coercion. And authoritative parenting style is balancing the nurturing, and the boundaries, and the, you know, um, you know, the typical parent stuff of helping the child understand and navigate the social world, you know. Narcissists, they just haven't got the capacity to make, I mean, the child needs that balance of nurturing and care. And yeah, it's clearly lacking in these people, these narcissists. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. Now, you said you have two brothers. So if as you look back, I guess we could actually have this conversation about looking back as y'all were growing up as well as how things are going now. Do you see any difference in how your father treats them or treated them versus how he treats or treated you or is currently treating you?
Absolutely. I'm sorry to say that my youngest brother is still in the relationship in Melbourne. And he's very isolated at the moment. So he's going through exactly what I went through. Uh, I guess that's one of the other insidious things with being in a narcissistic relationship is that they do isolate. And I was isolated for a good couple of decades. It was the most horrible experience you could ever wish on someone, to not be able to have that connection with other people. And in the end, it doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with them. So it can have very, very damaging effects on your mental health, because you're isolated from other people. And we need other people. We need to be connected to other human beings. And so it can cause all sorts of mental health issues, you know, and addiction issues. That, you know, Gabor Mate says that the root of addiction is lack of connection as well. So connection is vital for humans. Humans need touch. They need, you know, emotional connections. And so, yeah, my brother, unfortunately, he's a few years younger than me. He is currently really struggling in the relationship. He's extremely isolated. He's going through exactly what I went through right now. And unfortunately, my brother now has a treatment-resistant depression as a result. So it's really complicated. It's really complex stuff. They've tried everything. The psychiatrist has tried absolutely everything. All the antidepressants available, nothing's working. He's tried ketamine therapy. He ended up getting out a $10,000 bank loan to have this current therapy, and he got another $10,000 to go on a trip overseas. Now he's in $20,000 debt with the bank, and nothing's changed. And ironically, my father sent me an article that he read, because he reads all the newspapers, you know, as people do. And he sent me this study recently about antidepressants and how they've found that only 1/3 of people respond to antidepressants. So to me, that says that there's a deeper issue that the medication cannot fix, you know. So I know that my brother's troubles are caused by my father. You know, I know my brother's going through narcissistic abuse currently as well. So wish me luck, because they're coming up in 2 weeks.
For how long?
3 days, thank God. 3 days over the Labor Day weekend. But it's not Labor Day here, it's Labor Day in Melbourne. It's not Labor Day in New South Wales.
So they're coming up there.
Yeah, I'm just preparing.
That's awful about your brother. Oh my, I hadn't ever considered a treatment-resistant depression. I can't imagine having to live in a state like that at all. And what you said about antidepressants is surprising, but it's not surprising, because in most of the antidepressant commercials that I've ever seen, one of the side effects is suicidal thoughts. And I'm like, well, if you're here to make me not be depressed, why would a side effect or a potential side effect be something like suicidal thoughts? So that's
exactly.
Wow. Yeah. That's unfortunate for the brother.
That inner, you know, that deeper meaning, that deeper inner, you know, it's a band-aid, you know. A lot of those medications, I think they are a band-aid. They're not really getting to the real issues. that are causing the mental health.
And a lot of
Yeah,
conversations and therapy needs to be had, because we hold on to a lot of things and a lot of people don't understand. Like, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. A lot of people don't understand that how traumas that we've experienced in the past, or any kind of negative impact that we've gone through or negative situation, if we don't actually acknowledge the situation, digest what happened, and see the role that we played in it, but also how what was outside of our control was outside of our control. We just continue to pack on and pack on and pack on all of this negative energy in our bodies, and our body can only do what it can do to get rid of it. Like in my case,
absolutely.
I was depressed and I didn't realize. I felt like I was, but I didn't realize it until I got out. And the way, thankfully, the way that my body expressed the internal chaos and anguish and agony and depression that I was going through was that it just, like, it broke my hair off and it just pulled my hair out. So my hair was thinning and breaking off, and I didn't know why. But
Same,
but
same.
the
Adrenal
body does.
fatigue causes that. Sorry, adrenal fatigue is linked with hair thinning and hair loss. Yeah, as well.
And
So
girl, let me
yeah,
tell you, that fight or flight was on all the time. And I can completely understand how, like, you're constantly on high alert and your body, our
and
body.
the hypervigilance goes with that adrenal fatigue. You're always on the lookout for danger, and because you never know when it's going to hit. You know, you never knew what they're going to say, what they're going to do. You always had to try to predict it, and yeah, it's exhausting. So you
So,
realised when you left, you felt relieved. It sounds like it was like a weight lifted off your shoulders. Like,
oh, absolutely. I could breathe. Like, it felt like when I left, I could actually enjoy oxygen. Like, I could take in a full breath and expel a full breath.
wow, yeah,
It was insane. It was
wow.
insane. And it's
I'm so
unfortunate.
glad we're talking about it because, yeah, I went through similar. And at the time, it's so hard to make decisions almost when you're in that, when you're in that state, like, because you're at that stage of exhaustion by then, I think. And it's so hard to make decisions. And you can get angry and, things like that. It can get really overwhelming, I know. But once you do take that step out and you look back in, you can start to see it for what it is. And you can't blame anyone because, like, when I was training as a psychologist, my supervisor said to me, when you're in a relationship with a psychopath, she's using, that word, to describe pretty much the NPD as well. You won't know it. You won't know it. And that's the love bombing and all that stuff, when, it's, you can't control it. We learn through experience, oh gosh, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I do think that there is we can definitely heal. Once we recognize what it is, we can get out of there and we can salvage what we've got, and make the
Absolutely.
most of it.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to point out for anybody who's listening is that Sarah keeps saying that you can't blame anyone. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like when I hear that, because you would think if you haven't been in the situation, it's all the other person's fault. They, like, you have to blame them for what you're experiencing. Or if you are in the situation, you're either putting blame on yourself for the decisions that you're making to stay and keep enduring, or you could blame that person for them doing the things. What I learned once I got out and was able to dive into God's word and clear my mind and just really start the healing journey is that the reason he's the way he is because he hasn't been able to face his own trauma. And because of that, his body's keeping his own score and it's lashing out at anyone who could possibly get close to him for whatever reason.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. And
I think
I totally hear the Christian narrative because I actually am a believer as well. I consider myself as sort of more non-traditional because I've had such a crazy path, and there is actually a lot of narcissism in churches, and so I'm sort of not in a particular church at the moment, but I never rule it out for the future, because I've met some amazing people through the church, actually. I met a former perpetrator, actually. This is amazing. In a church in Melbourne, because I got rebaptized actually in 2022. I think I got rebaptized as an adult. And I had an amazing sort of sponsor there. He actually was a previous offender. He would be considered a sociopath, actually, and he has narcissistic personality disorder. But he turned to God, and oh my God, he still struggles because he still has the disorder, but he's trying, he's trying. He's doing a lot of outreach. I spoke to him, I think, last week. He's an older gentleman, he's got his own daughters and stuff, but we've got a really kind of unusual friendship that's developed. And so just on that note, I think it is possible that, if they can turn, but they've got to be ready for it. They've got to be ready to do that and ask for God's help, because I'll tell you, narcissists get so frustrated. They think they're doing it all on their own, but they don't have to. But, like, they could ask for help. They could ask for God's help. But if they're not at that stage, that you can't, force them to, But, oh, man, like, it's just, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of the listeners out there, how to help, because I mean, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. I still struggle, because I've always still got to have, I'm always going to have boundaries if I'm going to have a relationship with my father. That will never change. It is considered an untreatable disorder, generally. So just the last couple of days in preparing for my father's visit, I'm trying to just get my approach right in my mind. How am I going to deal with him when he comes up? How am I going to make myself feel safe? Do I have a safety plan in place? And I think you always have to be, you've got to be prepared if you're going to stay in there like you said, the body suffers, I mean, self-care is so important. And I don't know, there's just so much I'm sure we could talk about, there's just so much, but I just think that, just take the steps. Everybody's journey is different. Every victim's journey, is different, but we're never alone, like there's always someone that's been through it. And I would encourage people to reach out. That's what got me through. I survived to this point because I reached out to all the domestic violence hotlines and the Lifeline hotlines up here in Australia. And they got me over the state lines, because we had to drive away and leave and move interstate. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't have got here safely. And get your intervention orders if you need to, do what you can to create some breathing space to work out what you want to do next, And the other thing is freestyle dancing. Oh my gosh, that has been amazing for me. I absolutely love it. I reckon that helped me so much, because we hold a lot of trauma in our bodies. And whether it's exercise even, we hold a lot of trauma in our joints. That helped me immensely to prepare to leave. So I definitely encourage that as well, if that's your thing,
So glad you said that. So that makes three things. But you were saying, not sure how you could help anyone who's listening right now. I just want to recap on what you said, because you did drop some really, really important, impactful, and powerful things that anyone in that situation can do. Number one, you got to set boundaries. It's hard to set boundaries if you're living in the abuse. Now, if the abuse is like a come and go, you have the authority to set boundaries, even if it does mean getting authorities involved and getting paper orders and anything like that to say, I need you to keep your distance. But one of the ways to set boundaries is really coming to a place where you're ready to not endure this for someone else. because what I learned was, from my experience, the fear of staying had to be greater than the fear of leaving. Whatever things you have lined up for why you don't want to leave, the unknown, being afraid to be a single mom, not having any money, all of the things that you have listed for the reasons why you're staying, if your fear of staying does not outweigh the unknowns of leaving, you're never going to leave. And I just really urge anyone who's currently in this situation that you have to consider your life here. Your life is at stake, because so many times these people end up taking someone else's life and they just move on. They just move on to another life, and nothing, maybe they serve a little time here if they get caught, maybe they don't. But you have to come to a place where you value yourself enough to say that I just can't, me your my care for you can't be more than my care for myself or my children. If you have children in this, like the impact that it's having on the kids, even if they aren't necessarily suffering directly, they're going to suffer, they're going to carry that trauma with them. And it's our responsibility as the adults to get the proper therapy. So, like Sarah said, set your boundaries. You've got to set your boundaries. And then, more importantly, seek help. Like, there's so much support. And we're so afraid to do these things because you may feel like you don't have your friends, you don't have your family. There's a lot of support out here, but it does require work. And I know that when you're in these situations, you're exhausted all the time, and then you got to sneak and try to find help when that person is either away from the house or asleep or something. But create a plan. If it takes a while, if it's not a quick plan, at least have a plan in place, and somebody that you can tell that you have an exit plan in place, and just start working the plan, because your life is valuable. It's important. You have a purpose here, and we want you to be here shining your light, because the world needs it and nobody can shine it the way that you shine it. And the dancing, when I tell you, oh my gosh, I dance so much. I'm so I MB is my name, right? I go by MB. M is short for
Okay.
Emily. My mom named me Emily, and I shortened it to M because, like, everybody who really loved me, my family called me Miss M. My friends would call me Eminem or M's, or people at work, like anybody who showed affection to me and who loved me just being me. It was always M. So I just like to say that because I like people. I love people. And the B actually stands for boogie.
That is
But
that I love that so much. I
I,
love that so much.
girl, I was a dancer.
Oh,
I danced a lot, and then when I got in that relationship and I got caught in it, like, it faded. All of me started to fade, and now that I'm free again, like, I'm just in the house, just like you said, just
look at
music is
it.
therapy in and of itself. And so
It is actually a somatic therapy. It is a somatic therapy. It actually developed in the one that I do anyway, the form of dance I do is called Five Rhythms, and it actually was started in the States actually as a somatic therapy for psychiatric patients. Yeah, and now
amazing.
they've adapted it for anybody to use as a healing modality. So it's absolutely fantastic. And I encourage people never to give up, always reach out, don't give up, never second guess yourself, don't gaslight yourself. It's easy for someone to try and gaslight us, but if we listen to them, we're going to gaslight ourselves as well. We need to separate our reality from the reality of the perpetrator. They're different realities, and we're connected. There's always going to be someone ready to help. Always. It was my experience. It was an amazing experience calling all the lifelines and the phone lines, the domestic violence. I always got a different person, but they helped me in their own way, and it was an amazing experience, actually, an amazing sort of collective experience. Yeah.
When you're in a situation that's abusive, whatever level it is, you feel alone, because what they've done, they're masters of isolation. And so you really, really feel alone. But to be able to just call somebody, a stranger, and just to have this conversation, even if you haven't come to the point where you're ready to lead, you're always going to be at a place where you just want to feel like somebody cares. And the people who actually did care have,
Absolutely.
either by your doing or the person is doing, the perpetrator's doing, they've isolated you from that because they want you to be dependent on them. They want you to feel like there's nobody else there.
Do
But
it for yourself. Do it for yourself. Like,
yes,
if you're really hitting rock bottom and you're really struggling, just please do it for yourself. Do it for your kids. Don't, there can be times where we get stagnated. I've been in despair. I've been in just places of despair, where I feel like I can't do anything. I feel overwhelmed. Um, call up someone, call a helpline. If you're struggling and don't have many connections due to isolation, they're always around, and that's what they're there for. They're there for that. So yeah, call them. Just call them. Yeah.
well said. Sarah, thank you so much for taking your time to share your
Oh,
story. And I
thank
think
you.
what I feel like what people are really going to get from your story and your message is just to really, really love on themselves and really, really remember that you are not alone, regardless of how it feels in the moment. You are not alone. You have the power to reach out to somebody, even if you end up having to hang up because somebody comes in the room. You have an opportunity to get on the phone with somebody who does care about you, whether they know you or not. And I just wanted to reiterate that what Sarah said. Thank you. It is such a privilege and an honor to be able to share this space with you, to be able to share your story with you, to be able to experience your light on this episode with us today.
Thank you so much, Emily. It's a pleasure, and it's so lovely meeting you. And just keep going. Yeah, keep going, and yeah, never give up. The light's always there, even when you don't feel like it is. And keep learning too. I mean, I'm still learning. We're always learning. We learn throughout our whole lives, and I just also encourage people to never stop learning. There's so much information about narcissistic abuse and recovery out there now, and it's getting only more and more. And so that the awareness is increasing a lot now. So, and I do believe that we're critical agents in that regard at this point in time. Our role is, I mean, as tough as it is to go through it, I do believe we are the light bearers. We're the ones that can potentially shed light on this issue of narcissism and narcissistic abuse and recovery. So yeah, I'd also encourage listeners to learn more about narcissistic abuse and recovery, because there's a lot of information out there now. So yeah, keep going.
Well, listen, Sarah said it. I ain't got nothing else to say. I just want to say keep showing up, keep sharing your love, keep shining your light. And y'all know what it
Thank you.
is. We gone.